There are a ton of builds in Destiny, and with Frontiers on the horizon, I asked you all what you thought was the best build for every subclass on each class. Those votes and responses are what sparked this series to life, and I'm making these videos in hopes that they can be used as refreshers for current players and complete guides for new players looking to hop into the game. All of these builds will not be using the seasonal artifact and can be used in any endgame content that you would like to do. So if you want a build to work towards that should last theoretically forever, look no further. Once everything is posted, there will be a total of 18 builds for you to chase after, so if you're curious about another playstyle, definitely be sure to check them all out. I've been working on this project for quite a while, and it has definitely taken a long time, so I really hope you all can enjoy them. If it wasn't for you, series like this could not exist, so I just wanted to say thank you. And finally, if you are new here and enjoying the content, consider doing all the normal YouTube stuff and joining our Discord server. All of your support really does go a long way and is genuinely appreciated. But without further ado, thanks for clicking on the video, and let's jump right into the build. All right, with the Arc, Warlock, and Titan out the way, we have one more to move on to, and that is, of course, the Hunter. When it comes to the Arc Hunter, this is a very good build, but I don't think it's going to compete as much as something like the Arc, Warlock, and Titan can do. Yes, you're still going to have the Amplified, the Jolt, the ability spam, the Bolt Charge, everything of the sort like with the other two, but I don't think this build performs as well as the other classes. With that being said, this is still a very strong build, and you are pretty much unkillable with the amount of damage resist that you do have. And if you love chaining jolting abilities over and over again, you are definitely going to want to give this one a try. All right, jump right into it. First things first, we need to take a look at our exotic armor, and that is the Gifted Conviction. We use this in our prismatic build. We're going to use it in this one as well. It has the exotic perk, the Gift of Certainty. Activating Ascension or Tempest Strike throws bouncing explosives at nearby targets that jolt and damage them. Jolting nearby targets grants you damage resistance. Now, the really cool part about Arc that's different from prismatic is that with prismatic you can only use Ascension, but with Arc Strider, you can now use Ascension and Tempest Strike. So as a quick rundown, with Ascension, you're going to fly up into the air, make you and teammates below you amplified, and jolt every enemy below you. With Tempest Strike, you can slide, go for a melee ability, and you're going to send out this long streak of lightning that will jolt targets, and simultaneously also grant you damage reduction. That damage reduction will pair with our exotic, so whenever we jolt a target, we will get even more damage reduction, and since both Ascension and Tempest Strike can jolt, you're going to be able to have a ton of damage resistance pretty much 24/7. On top of that, with both of these abilities, when you use them, you will send out the arc grenades that can go out and jolt even more targets, so you can pretty much have everything on the battlefield jolted while having this insane damage resistance pretty much 24/7. Now, there is one more thing I do want to point out about Tempest Strike, and that is the fact that if you defeat a jolted target, it will grant a stack of Bolt Charge. So again, both of your abilities are going to be able to jolt, so every time you kill enemies with your abilities, you'll be granted stacks of Bolt Charge. And if you don't know what Bolt Charge is, essentially you can stack this up to 10, and once you're at 10, your next ability will cause down a lightning strike to do a ton of damage. So since you're spamming abilities all the time, this means you're going to constantly discharge this Bolt Charge over and over again, and it just makes things like your Ascension do a lot more damage. But jumping into the abilities, let's talk about how we're actually going to spam these over and over again. That's because we're going to be taking Gambler's Dodge. Gambler's Dodge now actually works with Ascension, so if you use Ascension in your targets, which you want to all the time anyway, so you can apply Jolt and everything of the sort, now you will also get your melee charge back, and your melee doesn't matter, you can take literally either one, but regardless, whenever you use the Gambler's Dodge, you're going to refill your Tempest Strike essentially. So you can use your Ascension, then go in for a Tempest Strike, you're going to get your Ascension back very quickly, go for the Ascension again, it will refill, the Tempest Strike again because of Gambler's Dodge, and you keep spamming these back and forth over and over again. For the other abilities, I take Flashbang Grenade purely for its utility. It can blind targets, which obviously makes them not shoot you, and it can also stun unstoppable champions. For the super, I go with Gathering Storm. This is pretty much the best PvE Arc super for Hunter. If you want to take something like Arc Staff, you can, just because it has the increased cooldown because it's a roaming super. It's not bad, but I would probably stick to Gathering Storm. Now for the Fragments, just like the Arc and Titan build, we're going to be taking Spark of Resistance, so we get that damage resistance when we're surrounded by combatants. You're going to be doing this all the time. The whole build is about getting damage resistance between activating your Tempest Strike, between getting the jolting from Gifted Conviction, so this is just even more, so again, you're pretty much unkillable. Next up is Spark of Ion, so where we defeat a jolted target or defeat a target with a Bolt Charge, it will create an Ionic Trace. So all our jolted targets from our Ascension and Tempest Strike will make Ionic Traces for us. All the Bolt Charge you're getting from Tempest Strike can also make Ionic Traces. Onyx Traces will refill all of our ability energy, which is great, which means we can spam Ascension even more. Next up is Spark of Discharge. So Arc Weapon Final Blows have a chance to create an Onyx Trace, and then collecting an Onyx Trace will grant a Bolt Charge. So this is another way to make an Onyx Trace. You're going to want to run an Arc Weapon with this build anyway, so now you have more Onyx Traces for everything we just mentioned. But on top of that, every time you pick up an Onyx Trace, you will now get a Bolt Charge. It's obviously going to stack very well with Tempest Strike, because defeating the Jolted targets makes the Onyx Trace, you get the Bolt Charge, picking the Onyx Trace up grants you another Bolt Charge, so you can get to ×10 very quickly. Now, next up is Spark Frequency. So melee hits will increase our reload speed and stability, but mainly on top of that, while amplified, we're going to get increased Bolt Charge stacks from all sources. So that means now whenever we pick an Onyx Trace up, instead of getting 1 Bolt Charge, we are going to be getting 2 Bolt Charge stacks, which is nice. So we're always going to be amplified, because Ascension does make us amplified. And it's worth noting that amplified does give you a 15% damage reduction, alongside making enemies harder to shoot you. So again, pairing that 15% with everything else we've already talked about, it's disgusting. Then for the final fragment is just Spark of Focus. So after spending for a short time, we're going to gain class ability energy. So this is great, because we're going to be running all the time this build to get into the next Ascension spam or get to the next Tempest Strike melee. So this is just great. So when you're going from mob group to mob group, you can just basically be sure to have your Ascension back up, and you can spam these all the time. And it's worth noting one more thing with Spark of Frequency. When you are amplified, it's going to increase the effects of that reload speed, and since this does count as a melee hit, your Tempest Strike will proc this, so you're pretty much going to always have the Spark of Frequency buff up pretty much 24/7, because Tempest Strike is a ranged melee attack, alongside, again, always being amplified with Ascension. Now, for the weapons with this build, you definitely want to run a weapon that can jolt, something like Bolt Shot, Jolting Feedback. Obviously, that is going to play extremely well into our subclass with things like Tempest Strike to give us Bolt Charge stacks, but I would also highly recommend a weapon that has some sort of ability regen perk. Something like Strategist on Sightline Survey is very, very good, because you're going to be able to get your class ability back a lot faster for Ascension. Even the Vesper's Hose Auto Rifle is extremely good for this as well. Something like Posterity, because it has great inheritance built into it. All of these options are very good. I would definitely recommend at least taking one thing to get your class ability back, be it Strategist, be it an Origin trait, and make sure that weapon does have Jolting Feedback or Bolt Shot on it, so you can play into everything else in the build. For heavy and special, it's completely up to you. Just take whatever is the current boss DPS meta, if I'm being completely honest, but just make sure you have at least one good primary with a Jolting perk and some class ability regen based perk. And for the stats of this build, definitely go with the 100 Resilience, so you get that 30% damage reduction. This will stack with everything else that we already talked about. And the main thing to note is that you want 50 mobility. With 50 mobility, you're actually going to get this to 100, because when you are amplified, which you will be all the time with Ascension, it grants a passive plus 50 to your mobility. So essentially, getting to 50 means you get to 100. So this is going to give you increased class ability cooldown rate for your Ascension, which is very, very good. Then for the rest of the stats, I just go with the 100 Discipline, just so I can get my utility grenade up a little bit more. You don't need melee, because the Ascension is going to refill your melee already, so that's kind of pointless. And with the amount of damage reduction you have, recovery is not super necessary, but if you want to stat into that more, you can. I just like having the utility of the Flashbang grenade a lot more often. Now for the armor mods, this is what I'm running if you would like to copy them down, but as a further look, first off, for our helmet, we're going to be taking a Harmonic Siphon, so Rapid Arc Weapon Final Blows can make orbs of power, so that our arc weapon that we were just talking about can now make orbs. This will play into armor mods. This will give us armor charge and everything of the sort. Next up is Hands On, so we gain bonus super energy on melee kills. Tempest Strike will be able to proc this, so we're going to be able to just get some extra melee energy, which is great. And then finally, I just take a heavy ammo finder just to increase our chances of finding heavy ammo. If it ever does get fixed as of recording this, it is not. If Dynamo will ever work with Ascension, you definitely want to take Dynamo up here and maybe take Hands On out, or if you just don't want heavy ammo finder, take Dynamo, because this will be disgustingly strong, but I don't know if they're ever going to fix it or if they intend it to not work with it. But unfortunately, as of right now, again, it does not work, but if it ever does, definitely slot that in. Now for our arms, a harmonic loader, so I increase the reload speed of my arc weapon, just so if I'm taking something like Bolt Shot, I can get that jolting shot in there a lot quicker. And then I take double heavy-handed here, because if you take 2 of these, it's going to decrease the cooldown that it does have to make it overpower. So whenever you get a melee kill, we'll make it overpower. Tempest Strike will be able to proc this. So between the cooldown of Tempest Strike, or mainly the cooldown of your Ascension, you're going to get this back every 5 seconds or so, so you're always going to make an orb every single time you go for a Tempest Strike kill. Now for our chest piece, I always just go with resistance mods, just swap these out whatever content that you're going into. And then for our boots, I'm taking a recuperation, so we get a chunk of health whenever we pick up an orb of power. I'm also taking a better already, so we start health regeneration whenever we pick up an orb, so we can basically get a melee kill with Tempest Strike, pick the orb up, we're going to start healing to full if we don't take damage, and then we also already get a big chunk of health, all the damage reduction that we've already mentioned. It makes you very, very hard to die. Then finally, I just take an Absolution so we get cooldown for every single one of our abilities. The reason I take this is because it acts very similar to an Ionic Trace. Ionic Trace gives you cooldown for all your abilities. This will as well. And you might be asking why I'm just not taking an Installation, because this gives you class ability cooldown. That seems to be the most effective. But the problem is currently right now, as of recording this again, Installation only gives a 4% energy back, whereas Absolution gives 5% back to your class ability. So you might as well just take the Absolution to get that extra 1%, while also letting something like a grenade benefit from it as well. Then finally, for our class item, I do take a proximity ward, so I gain a powerful overshoot and I go for a finisher. This just also helps with your survivability, but the main benefit is utility kickstart. So this is the one armor mod that will actually work with Ascension. Literally everything else does not. But if you have some armor charge and use your Ascension with utility kickstart, you will actually get some of your class ability energy back. So this is great to take. I just throw double in here because, again, nothing else really works too well, and you don't want something like a finisher mod to take your armor charge away. So having double utility kickstart means you can spam Ascension even more, which in return means you can spam Tempest Strike even more. And then on a final note, I do want to mention the artifact like I do at the end of all these videos. Yes, you don't have to take a single artifact perk for this build to perform very, very well, but obviously it is going to be a lot better if you do take artifact perks, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, with this season, you have a bunch of arc-based artifact perks that will just amplify this build to the next level. I would also highly recommend at least taking some champion mods over here so you can deal with champions, unless you just are strictly taking exotic weapons with champion mods on them. Because with the subclass, you will have ability to jolt quite a lot, so that can stun overload and your flashbang is unstoppable, but barrier is kind of just left in the dust, so you definitely at least want to take a barrier artifact perk depending on whatever weapon that you are running. But overall, again, you don't have to take any of these, but when Frontiers comes around, or if you're just building this right now, just be sure to click on the ones that obviously make sense. Amplify, bolt charge, anything sort of jolt, it's going to go a long way. Then for the absolute final part of the build, this is the Transmog I'm running. Obviously, again, I'm going for that very dark arc lightning themed look. I went for a very techie bounty hunter themed look here, and I think it turned out looking pretty cool. If you want to make your hunter look like this, definitely be sure to copy it down. But that is going to do it all for the arc builds. Of course, if this one doesn't vibe with you, be sure to check out the other arc builds and the prismatic ones as well. Going down the line, we're going to have even more subclasses coming out, so be sure to stick around. If you are a veteran player and watch this all the way through, I truly appreciate it, and I hope you learned at least one thing new. And if you are a returning or new player watching this, I wish you all the best of luck putting this build together for yourself. Anyway, though, that is going to do it all for me. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Peace.